Doesn't matter if we're no-tilling, we're conventional tillage, doesn't matter what you're doing today or what we possibly could be changing to. Goals of a proper seed bed are going to be the same. Perfect seed to soil contact when planting. Consistent seed bed. Good growing environment for the plants. I always throw this in there, only do what's necessary. But this right here, if I went and zoomed in on this right here, doesn't matter if you're no-till or conventional or strip till or minimum till or cover crops or whatever, this right here should always be the same. So when I'm talking about no-till, that doesn't mean that I'm saying we need to go out there and start no-tilling just for the sake of not putting inputs into our crop. We're not giving up. We're not accepting less. My goals when I'm putting the seed in the ground are still going to be that every time. Yeah.
Without derailing, one of the questions was closing wheel pressure. Is this a good point to cover about it? Is that derail?
So, what? Yeah.
That was my question on closing wheel. The only way I guess I know how to do it, or I shouldn't say on closing wheel, but on setting the down pressure, is to set it down and then literally kick the wheel and okay, did it move a little bit? That must have been about right. Is that accepted?
So row unit down pressure you're talking about. Okay, all right, sure. Yep. Okay, you just have springs. Okay, so that was going to be my first question is so just springs, we don't have any sensors on there telling us, right? Yep, okay. So if we we're on springs and so we stop, okay, understanding that we're changing that dynamic a little bit because we have stopped and the planter set a little bit. But if we go back there, can we move that gauge wheel? Okay. That is one way that we can look at it. But like I said, we are stopping, we are moving. And so that's not always maybe they're going to be the most accurate as to or indicative of what we were doing 20 feet, 30 feet, 50 feet ago. Okay. So I would do that. But when you are looking at the down pressure, when we look at wheel that row unit over here a little bit. Okay. Okay. So when we stop and you're looking at those gauge wheels, okay? Yeah. Here would be great. Okay, so right now we have this hiked up here a little bit, but when we stop, nope, that's fine. Nope. When we stop, what we're going to do is yeah, we can go up there and we can look at that. And certainly what we shouldn't do is be able to do this, okay? If we're doing that, then we're not going to have enough downforce on that. But really what we need to be looking at is this area right here, between the gauge wheels or the back of the opener disc actually, and our closing wheels, okay? Another way that we can do this is actually take a bracket and put a bracket in here. We're starting to make a bracket. There's some other companies that you can hike the closing wheels up, or you could put a tarp strap up there or something like that. And then that would allow you then to go farther and not just this. But if I have this all down, I'm going to look at this area right here. And what I should see is a nice firm V. All right. I want to see behind the opener discs, a nice firm V. I want to see my seed down there in the bottom. I think I have a picture of this coming up here in a couple more slides, but I should see, we should see this nice firm V right there, okay? If I don't see a V and I see the dirt actually falling in that area right there, I don't have enough down pressure, all right? If I see a firm V, then what I'm going to do, my seed's in here, we'll try to look at it like this. I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to push through the top, through the sidewall of this, and what I should be able to do is push in there. And it should be, I should be able to cave that sidewall off, okay? Not when I touch it, it all falls in. That's not enough downforce. But at the same time, if I go to push in there and all I do is I make a hole in there and that sidewall doesn't cave off, I have too much downforce. So the answer to the question, that's what we have to be checking, is that part right there. Now, if we pull our opener or our closing wheels up and we drive for 20 feet, 30 feet or whatever, we can do the same thing. We can go back there. We should see the nice firm V. Now, also in your V, when you look down in the V, we should actually see some cracks on the sidewalls. That does not mean open cracks, right? We don't want to see voids in there, because if that's the case, we're getting sidewall lift. If we're getting sidewall lift, then that dirt is going to fall in there. Sidewall lift will create little shelves there that our seed can bounce and get up into the side. Now we don't have near enough down pressure, because we're not holding that down. The seed can bounce up there, and now we start fooling around with our seed depth. So with nice firm V, we should see these cracks in here. If all we see is a smear that looks like it's wet right there, and a smear, then it probably is too wet, and we're getting the sidewall compaction in that. That's where we start talking about the hatchet roots and everything. But I will tell you that I see not enough downforce and not enough force on our closing wheels more often than I see too much. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that in the early 2000s, Greg Sauter taught us about hatchet roots and the sidewall compaction. And he scared us all to making sure that we weren't just going out there and maxing everything out. So we all thought, okay, I can't have too much downforce. I don't want, my roots going right down the seed trench because of the sidewall compaction. And so then we went too far the other way. Now, the question on the closing wheels. So, same thing. So how I've got this picture, and I got the same thing right over here. Maybe this one will be a little bit easier for you to see than on the screen. How I created that is with a 4-inch wide putty knife and a 1-inch wide putty knife. Every single time that I go to the field, I have my tape measure, I have my level, because that planter levelness is so important. I have my level, I have my tape measure, I have a 4-inch wide and a 1-inch wide putty knife. Those are my gotta have tools. So I take my direction of travel perpendicular to it. I'm going to stick my 4-inch putty knife in crossways. Then I'm going to take my 1-inch and I'm going to dig back. So right here, I've got my putty knife sticking in. I'm going to start digging. My putty knife's 4 inches wide, 4 inches long. So I'm going to stick it into the handle. I'm going to dig down 4 inches, across 4 inches, so I can expose all of that putty knife, and I'll come back 5 or 6 inches. As I'm digging, I find a seed. I put the seed off to the side so I knew where it was at. But I'm not worried about exactly. I'm worried about getting all the soil out of there. And once I do that, that putty knife will fall back towards us. It's loose on the one side. Now you've created this cross section. Once you have this cross section right here, the first thing we're going to do is visually, we're going to inspect this. All right. Now, obviously there's a seed right here. You do this enough time, you will find the seed. All right. When I put my seed off to the side, when I dig my first time, if I'm, that far back, okay, well, I'm probably going to be 5.5 inches or so, depending on your population and your row spacing. We should know about how far you need to go. Then I'm going to go up and I'm going to keep digging, and eventually I'm going to hit that perfect. You dig as many thousands times as I have, you're going to find that a lot. Yeah.
Perfect time to talk about seed depth.
As far as how deep we should plant, or as far as how to check the seed depth?
How deep you should be planting. That's a $0 gain on ROI. If you're concerned about cold weather, if you're concerned about germination issues with our chemical program, I think you are there to press equal.
I think how you measure that too, because I see people through seed companies that measure different than me, and I'm always arguing with them.
All right, so hold that question. We'll talk about this a little bit more, and then we'll come back to that question. So here's Mr. Bueller has brought his putty knife up here that he uses to dig the same way. Stick that in perpendicular right there. Everything back behind it right there. We're going to pull back, and then we're going to see this cross section, and we're visually going to inspect it. Now, on your depth thing, how to check the depth, you're exactly right, because right now I haven't fooled with that seed. I know where it's at, and I know exactly where the top of my soil is, because I haven't messed around with where that is when I'm digging down. And right now I can know exactly what depth my seed is. I think that's far more accurate than you take a dig it tool and you start digging down. We start messing around with where that seed is, and we throw dirt off to the side. And now how do we measure, where do we know where the top of the soil is? But when I visually inspect this here, what you see right here and in that picture up there is you see no difference. That's all the same. Okay, that's the first thing that we're looking for. I don't want to see holes or voids right there. I don't want to see different soil densities, chunks and voids and chunks and voids. Okay. I also don't want to see the left side and the right side, because if I see, when we start talking about closing wheels years ago, we used to talk a lot about putting 2 different closing wheels on, one spike and one rubber. The thought was you get some braking, you get some firming. The problem was you always get braking action on this side and firming action on this side. Every single time that you dig, you will see differences in those sides. And that's why we don't do that anymore. So you'll notice there's no center line right here. I've married the two sides together. So we have that open V that I was talking about, how we can check our down pressure. All right. Now we come through here and we start looking at our closing wheel performance. The 3 steps to closing this seed trench. Step 1 is to break the sidewalls. Step 2 is to marry those two sides together. And step 3 is to firm the soil around the seed. Okay. So break, marry, and firm. It has to be in that order. It has to be done well. If we don't do one of those steps very well, then the next step doesn't really matter, or it certainly diminishes the ability or the quality of how much we're doing on the second and the third steps. So we have to do those in order. When we do those in order and we dig properly, what we see right here is we've broken. There is no V. You can't see all that. We've broken that. We've married the two sides because you don't see a line. So now we've zigzagged. We've married the two sides together. There's no line. We haven't stuck it together. We've married them together. Now the third step is to look at the firmness. And so visually, I see consistency. That's good. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 1-inch knife that I've got, and I'm going to start digging, and I'm going to look on the left side, and I'm going to look on the right side, and I'm going to start digging it down over here, and I'm going to go by feel. Now, I don't have a metric for this. I can't tell you need X amount of force or pressure or whatever. And I will also tell you what, in my opinion, what that should feel like and what you should see may vary on conditions. Depth, moisture, how warm or cold the soil is. That can vary a little bit. But also what our forecast looks like for the next 24, 48, 72 hours and maybe beyond. How firm I get that and what that looks like may depend on those factors right there. But what I do know is that if I start digging on the left-hand side right here, and as soon as my 1-inch putty knife touches that, if that just all crumbles and falls in, I don't have enough down pressure. All right. I need to make sure that I'm actually forcing that to break. Okay. Now I'm not advocating that we up here, we've got to take this and start chipping this down there like it's clay or something like that. Right. That being said, if we're planting early and if I have pretty cool soil temperatures and I've got moisture in there, but it's starting to get hot and the wind, is really, it's a windy day. Let's say that, my soil temperature is only 48 degrees, but all of a sudden now we're approaching 80 degrees today and the wind's blowing 30 mile an hour and it looks like it's going to happen for the next few days. I'm going to make sure and pack that in. I want to firm that more because I don't want my moisture to escape too quickly. All right. We got 48 degree soil temperature. Our seed is not going to germinate right away. So if we take every single closing wheel available on the market and we look at those 3 facets, the break, the marry, and the firming. Okay. And if I was to take that wheel and I was to actually press it in there, hand by hand and see what it does. And if I was to rate 0 to 5, 5 being good, let's take a rubber wheel, for instance. A rubber wheel, imagine if you were actually pressing that through a sidewall right there, what would you see? All right, you're going to see simply force pushing that, okay? There's no braking action with that, okay? It's only going to push. So any smooth wheel, smooth rubber wheel, smooth cast wheel, if I was going to rate 0 to 5 on the braking action, I'm going to say it's a 0. The only way that we break and create loose soil with that is more and more force, which then obviously is going to be the firming action. And so a smooth wheel is going to be a 5 on firming. Okay. Now the marrying, the second point of that, or the second facet, that will depend a little bit on the design of the wheel or the tooth or anything, but also the distance that they are away and maybe even angle there. But when we look at something like the twister closing wheel, that's what the design of the twister, that's what we had in mind when we did that, was we wanted to make sure that it would penetrate and it would break. So we can go back and we can look at some of our other spike closing wheels. There's one over there on Pete's outdated display stand. Pete, it's good that we show what we used to do. On the left, there's a cast spike wheel that has a diamond shape to it. That wheel was designed back in the 90s, actually. And what we didn't know, we didn't know. But that wheel, what we did know is a smooth wheel is really good at firming. And so we wanted to design a wheel that was the opposite. That was really good at braking. It wasn't until we did that after years and years that we started realizing it's not really giving us this very good firming action. So that's what led us to designing different teeth. And the twister closing wheel today, the reason why it is so successful on millions of rows is because of the exact design of the tooth. We want to make sure that tooth, first of all, will penetrate and break. Check. We want to make sure that the wheel has the ability to marry the two sides together. Now, I can change that. You know, if somebody in here said, all right, well, Andy, I put mine 2 inches apart and they didn't do much. Yeah, you're right, because they're going to be doing all the action out here. So we're not marrying it. So the distance certainly can be changed change how that marries, but it does a good job of marrying. And then the firming action that you get with that design of the tooth. If you put this in the sidewalls and you look at it, you will notice that the twister wheel is going to firm much differently than what that cast spike wheel is going to do over there. It's going to do much different than what a smooth wheel does. So that's back to your question there. Absolutely. The wheel, the design of the wheel is going to make a difference on that.
How big do you want that gap in?
Well, that can vary a little bit. I mean, but we're gonna tell you 1 3/8 inches. But that ties directly into your question about seed depth. Okay. Now,
You're saying 1 3/8 inches between
the very inside of the teeth. Yep.
I was gonna ask, the teeth.
The teeth. The teeth itself, the very inside point. Yep. 1 3/8 inches. Yep. Exactly. That is assuming basically 2 inches of depth or around thereabouts. Now, if somebody in here says, in my experience, I swear that I need to be planting 3 inches deep, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. There are some instances where we would suggest that planting deeper is going to be a good thing. So I'm a little bit flexible, I guess I would say, on what I believe the right depth is, but too shallow, we definitely know is problems. Too deep, I feel like we can change that in the performance of our closing and some of our adjustments and our conditions. All right. So twisters. Okay. So we talked a little bit about that. We didn't talk about which one. Okay. So we have poly, we have cast, a complete cast, and we also have a cast ring that goes on the plastic centers. The big difference in those options is weight. So I talked about the 3 facets, right? Break, marry, and firm. Your different weight, different pressure is what's going to give you the different firming action. As our conditions, soil density and moisture level and everything becomes higher, we need more weight to make sure and force that shut. Okay. But it's not just, if we're no-tilling, we need cast, and if we're conventional tillage, we need poly. It's not quite that simple. The bottom line is we need to make sure that we're ensuring that we're getting enough firming action on that third part of the closing. So high speed, that starts making a difference, right? We don't want them things bouncing as they're going through the ground. Well, we just put more spring pressure on it, right? There is a difference between spring pressure and reacting versus static weight. And the more weight that we have there, more consistently it's going to hold down, especially at higher speeds. So without a doubt, we have sold millions of the polys. But the cast, we've come out with the cast, in the last 5 years, 4 years, whatever, we are definitely seeing more and more benefits to the cast, and we're doing more and more cast all the time. So I personally like the cast a lot. Like I said, I'm no-tilling and strip tilling, but that's giving us more firming action to make sure that we're actually getting the seed to soil contact and firming the soil around the seed, keeping that moisture in there.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to check out our complete Yetter Solutions Sitter playlist at YouTube. And as always, we're here to help you find profitable solutions for your operation. So, if you need more information or have a topic idea for a future episode, drop an email to solutions@yetterco.com.